Hi, let me get you up to speed, especially if you've never read anything about Magic the Gathering and you're just here because, I don't know, I got the vibe. In which case, please, while you're here, say hi. I'm fascinated by you and as to what brought that on. Anyway, I want to talk to you about the fascinating thing that is watching one of the best and biggest in the business actually do a terrible job at something. What does it look like when the people with the money and the competence to never screw up anyway? This is about the set Through the Omenpaths from Magic the Gathering, from the perspective of a custom Magic designer, the type of problem it is, and how to fix it. This video will not feature custom Magic designs or unsolicited cards, because this is not about mechanics. This is, in fact, almost entirely about flavor. And you know, Wizards employees, I think you should watch this one and offer me a job. Anyway, before I start, I'm going to praise Wizards of the Coast for being pretty good at making magic. Since I'm doing that, I feel I should also remind you that Wizards of the Coast hired Orion Black to consult on Dungeons and Dragons back before they worked for Dimension 20, and then ignored and marginalized Black such that they wound up quitting the company and making a public statement about the lack of support and response they got from management. That's always worth remembering, especially when people praise the corporation that makes the products for its values. Don't trust companies. Some context first. I've been playing Magic the Gathering since Scourge. That's 20 years of watching the game evolve, stumble, and recover. When I started playing, the decks Psychotog and Mirari's Wake were standard legal, and they were awful. 1 year after I started playing, we were in the shadow of original Darksteel era Affinity and Skullclamp. Since that point, every year I've been able to say that I've seen the game consistently getting better. Not joking, even when the game was less fun or I had a harder time engaging with it, the game was better than it was when I started and better than it had been the previous year. The bad things, the bad moments, were things that they tried to deal with and generally haven't had the same mistake happen twice for the same reason. I don't have to live in a game world where the best green common is a 2/3 for 2, and the next best green common is pivoting to red for Sparksmith. That means I've seen Coreblade, and Energy, and Cat Lady, and Astral Slide, and Three Fairy, and Oko, and Questing Beast, and I have enough memory of all of this to remember that largely, Wizards of the Coast are good at making this game, and getting better at it. Problems tend to be new and unique and often unprecedented. Even this one that brings things on today. Thing is, I can say all this because I have more experience playing this game than some of you have with solid food, and that also means people like me should be regarded with caution when we talk about a game and its problems. Look, I am captured. I have a huge collection of cards that I have not left a box in 5 years because I don't need them to play, but why haven't I sold them on? Even if I do find a reason strong enough to leave this game, I know it will probably be temporary. This game is in me. Thus, bona fides for the conversation. I am a game designer. I have designed a lot of Magic the Gathering as a custom designer, an amateur, even if I bring to it a standard I think is much higher than most in that space. I've made games that are independent of the entire ecosystem, and people have given me money to have those games. I don't have any actual insight into the going-ons at Wizards of the Coast. I've just read most of the public-facing information that is available to more or less everyone, and I just happen to remember it pretty well and have my own particular expectations of this kind of business environment. My time in this space doing this and having done game and amateur magic design positions me, I think, very well to discuss through the Omenpaths. But I also want to put forward the importance of recognizing what Wizards are trying to do and what a mistake really looks like. See, I have a maxim I teach game design with. Players can tell you what feels bad, but that doesn't mean that they can tell you what the actual problem is. They can't usefully tell you how to fix it. They might have good ideas, and you should listen to them, but just being a player of a game doesn't make you capable of recognizing what the choices in the game are for and why they should change. From here on out, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking about things that are known facts, but when I talk about why it happened or what Wizards did behind the scenes, understand I am at best giving you an educated guess. So let's talk about what I mean by a stumble. Wizards does not usually stumble. There are things that if you're a super entrenched nerd like me may stand out to you as mistakes or problems, but the overall scale of them is insignificant to the overall scope of the success of the game. When you are making the most successful trading card game in history, you do not measure your successes in sales, you measure them in the rate of growth of sales over the last thing you did. Magic lives on an uphill slope, and the question is always how high that slope is climbing. Consider Ether Drift from earlier this year. Common wisdom is that the set didn't do too well, and it didn't. Mark Rosewater has confirmed that, but he didn't say it failed, he said it didn't hit its expected targets. And those targets are always accounting for growth. Which is to say, it did still grow in sales, but not by as much as they thought or wanted it to. Which is wild for a vehicle set where you were best off not playing vehicles, and a road trip set where you never left the car. Recent standard bannings, or failure to ban in Legacy recently, that's something for very entrenched players. Not the majority of players to care about. That's not a stumble, that's a misjudgment. A stumble is when Wizards has a major problem they need to address and do something that isn't precedented. Every ban is part of the precedent and the process at this point. The last major stumble happened in 2020 with Ikoria and its companion mechanic. Wizards haven't issued power level errata for cards since 2006 at this point, where the philosophy was changed to ban cards outright rather than to try and change how the card worked. And make no mistake, it was 2020, but the design was probably being made around 2017. This is not a pandemic problem. That's what a major stumble looks like, because otherwise, Magic the Gathering is a boringly excellent game made by the best that ever did it. It's by no means the best card game, after all. Everyone has their faves, and even Richard Garfield improved on his design. But as far as the job of making a game that lasts forever goes, Wizards are unparalleled. They don't need to make the best game, they want to make a stable, profitable, growing game. Magic isn't built to keep everyone forever. It's built to cycle players in and out. As long as new players keep joining, the game survives and grows and gets more money. A significant portion of Magic the Gathering's player base were not born when the game was made. The game is good because there are people around who want to make the game a good game, but that is a coincidence to the system around it, and that system is there to make more money. Now, on to the thing that makes more money, even if it doesn't make the game good. Okay, so Spider-Man. Wizards have been doing this thing recently called Universes Beyond. It started with 2020's Secret Lair release of the mechanically unique Walking Dead cards. Since then, Wizards as an arm of Hasbro have been steadily increasing the number of Magic cards they make that aren't part of the established lore and world of Magic the Gathering. This grew to include things that were already related, like the Dungeons & Dragons movie, or Stranger Things, places for brand synergy. Then we get things like Doctor Who and Assassin's Creed, which made it seem like we were now in a permanent place of always having a Universes Beyond product happening, but also it was happening over there, because none of those cards are particularly relevant. I hate Doctor Who with a passion that really isn't reasonable. And I have to admit that the Doctor Who cards are an incredible design for keeping them out of the way of anyone who isn't excited to play them just because they're Doctor Who. Unfortunately, keeping things on the other side of a wall is part of the problem. Because Wizards announced then that we'd be getting Spider-Man. And after that announcement, we got the follow-up that not only were we getting Spider-Man, we're getting standard legal Spider-Man. You might know what standard is. Okay, standard is the tournament environment that most Magic the Gathering is oriented around. It's good, I like it. It's not the most important part of the game, not by a long shot, but it is important, and it's a play environment that keeps entrenched people entrenched, like me. Standard needs to be varied and playable, and the barrier for entry to standard for a card is different to the needs of other kinds of sets. The previous Universes Beyond sets were designed for two extremes of player: brand new players who didn't have to deal with heavy, powerful cards, and deeply enfranchised players who were already well aware of what extremely powerful cards look like. Now, Spider-Man was being changed to be a standard legal set instead of one of those niche both ends of a spectrum designs, and the result is a set that has problems. But I'm not here to complain about those right now per se. Instead, the important thing is that this licensing agreement did not include the release of digital versions of these Spider-Man cards, and Wizards couldn't just get Marvel to do what they wanted. Marvel, after all, spend mouse money when they need to. The solution was Magic the Repackaging. Repackage the Spider-Man set as Through the Omenpaths. Same mechanics, same cards, but now with multiversal Magic characters instead of Marvel ones. It's not Spider-Man anymore, it's generic Magic multiverse stuff. This is going to be the place of our first lesson in custom Magic design. The fiction of your cards helps them play properly in the game. Magic is a complex game. It's really hard to keep everything straight. And mechanics have flavor and lore because that makes it easier to keep track of what they're doing. There are mechanical trends tied to common flavors because that helps players navigate the board state. Not just that large creatures have art of large creatures, but also that the game uses mechanical names to help you track things. Threshold is a mechanic that builds up, and it does something once you cross it. Transform is where a card goes from being one thing to another thing, but it's still the same stuff. Trample means you run over something. These terms are not neutral, and there's a reason a bunch of mediocre cards also have mediocre names. The problems of the Spider-Man set are present, let's say. These problems are more evident in Through the Omenpaths, and part of where those problems show themselves is in the way that without a coherent identity, the fictions of the cards don't explain what they're doing, and it makes them less intuitively coherent. And how could they have an overarching fiction holding everything together? The rest of the game's story isn't moving forward. Characters introduced in Through the Omenpaths aren't being introduced in the rest of the game. They're Spider-Man characters happening over there on the other side of the wall. Everything in Through the Omenpaths has to happen within Through the Omenpaths, affect nothing, and ideally go away afterwards in order to keep the release of the next in-universe set completely coherent with the next paper in-universe set. Through the Omenpaths is Magic the Gathering's filler anime arc. Worse, it might be its first filler arc. Look, here's some total speculation. I think that in order to meet the art needs for Through the Omenpaths, Wizards used slush art. That's art commissioned for other sets, but that was never used. I think reusing slush art is cool and good. I think us getting to see more of the art Wizards of the Coast is paying to get to see exist is good, and I think that explaining art with new cards is a really interesting challenge. As a storyteller, I love it. But it does mean that here in Through the Omenpaths, the fiction does not cohere even with itself, with pieces from all over the multiverse that have dubious narrative relationship to one another or a meaningful connection to anything. At least anything that already exists. Indeed, some of the cards in this set didn't exist when the cards in this set were made. They don't even reference one another. It's not like this means there are only bad cards in the set or anything, but Spider-Man cards aren't very good mechanically. There are a lot of very weak cards in this set. Not just weak in that they aren't likely to have an impact on standard, but weak in that they're not good in comparison to other cards that already exist in standard. There are some cards in the set that are worth trying out in specific decks, but largely, this is a set made up of cards that aren't worth remembering and aren't going to be worth hanging on to. There is some basic good. The update to how Transform card works is good and obvious to me. Mayhem seems like an attempt to update the Madness mechanic in a way that won't confuse players nearly as much as Madness can. Connive is a great mechanic to bring back, as is Modified, and they work well together. That's it. I don't want to sit here and pick specific problems with every card in the set because that's a long task that starts with "in web" is a stupid name and expands to include the way that even specific cards screw up mechanics they're meant to express, like how Scorvus conniving at the end of turn is after the window for all but one Mayhem card, meaning that this thing doesn't enable any of the connive or any of the madness in the set he's from. He doesn't work. I get so mad. And he's a black card. He's not a blue card. He doesn't even get to do the modified stuff. I'm fine. The way sets work is that they have standard, reliable effects that every deck kind of wants, adjusted for the specific set to match its themes and give the whole set a distinct mechanical character. These reliable, staple effects allow colors to play reliably, but in a way that's interesting and doesn't just feel like you're playing the same set over and over again. This means there will be better and worse removal cards from time to time. Your set may want cheap creatures being easy to kill, or it may want large creatures to be easy to kill. Counterspells, burn spells, big creatures, small creatures, these are all there to serve the needs of the set, and as a designer, you have to know what you want them to express. And good cards are the cards you want to focus effort on to make them exciting. It's okay if a set has a bunch of forgettable moonfolk dorks, if there are one or two really good ones that people like. Through the Omenpaths doesn't have many cards that are strong or interesting and suggest building around them or playing with them when you remove the flavor of Spider-Man from them. When you're not remembering Spider-Man Noir's cool Nicolas Cage voice, Crowball is a slow, expensive creature that doesn't really suggest it's meant to work with anything but a limited environment where you just needed something big at the top end. And he's legendary, and he's meant to be a character with an identity that matters, and we're supposed to care about it, and he doesn't even get flavor text. What's more, his creature type includes one of the other big problems for Through the Omenpaths, which is he's a hero. Hero and villain. So, the hero and villain creature types are important to the flavor of the Spider-Man set. They're there to make sure that the player who likes the hero characters can find the ones they like, and they react to one another to show the way that heroes work together in a superhero setting. By linking heroes as a creature type and supporting it, you have a good, robust starting place for anyone getting started in the set. This is typal design. It's how I got started playing Magic the Gathering all the way back in Onslaught. It is a good idea. Except, in Through the Omenpaths, we have no information about any of these characters, so the hero type has to do all the explaining by itself. They're out of type with how normal Magic creature types work too, because creature types are largely lacking in moral valency. A creature type in Magic is normally chosen as a neutral signifier that lets the cards be grouped together usefully. It's why there are some gently wobbly boundaries around them, such as with cats. We don't have sighthounds and pointers and lapdogs, we just have dogs. It feels, when you're completely without flavor to work from, impossible to me to indicate something is a hero or a villain. A spider dinosaur hero needs a lot of explanation. It needs something to make it make sense, and we just don't have that. We don't even have the room for that. The card needs to live and die on its name, type, and art, and there is nothing here to explain why this spider dinosaur isn't just a spider dinosaur, but a hero spider dinosaur. Thus, our three problems. There's no coherent fiction, there are weak cards, and the hero and villain creature types impose morality on things for no good reason, resulting in incoherent, flavorless slush. Still, I can't just complain, I'm gonna step up. You can't fix the cards. You can't change the cards to be better than they are. That's a fixed point in space. There is, however, something that you can do as a card designer to address the puzzle of the flavor that isn't holding together in this space. And I do this knowing that I cannot possibly get art for this, and I'm not going to womp up a bunch of stable diffusion awfulness that makes you think, oh, he's got such a big brain. You're just going to have to listen to me talk here. Here's the pitch. This set should have been Charlotte's Web meets Phantom of the Opera set on Ravnica. You have a group of sentient spiders in the Golgari who seek to tell their story, to try and bring their people up and out of the sewer in the freshly post-Markov Manor world, where certain power bases are being destabilized. These weavers are making a play to present to the world who they are and trying to throw a big fancy event, but that event has been complicated by an important magical artifact from down in the sewers finding its way into the theater, and it starts warping reality around it. This ties into the existing story spaces of Ravnica, but also lets the writers explore ideas that aren't normally forefront. When the Rakdos theaters are normally presented in the story, they're gory and scary and horrific. And not the fact that the Rakdos oversee and protect all kinds of performance as a part of their identity. The Golgari's ability to represent a family and growing community aren't normally represented by them doing something big and creative, which, that's a thing communities do. So you have these spider people who are trying to team up with people to help them construct a play. The team up cards can represent existing characters. You can have Proft and a spider. That's part of the Weavers, and they are doing a role in the play. Characters get drawn into interacting with the play because they're trying to find the artifact, and going along with the spiders is the easiest way to do this. That way you can use art of existing characters, but without anything they need to do in the story that's out of the normal can be attributed to the influence of the Weavers or them playing a role. You can put masks on characters. You can get artists to color for all sorts of stuff this way. It might be a bit silly to rename N-Web as Exit Stage Left, but that's the basic idea. That's the premise. All the support for villains and heroes can be people who are there supporting the play. You can have funny characters or monsters wearing costumes or spiders holding up masks, and the fact that none of it matters in the greater sense of things is part of the fiction of we are going to a playhouse for a one-time event. There are specifics to dig into. I really like the way that this would open the room for a mono-black character who starts out as some kind of hero and villain who brings something back from the dead, becoming a symbiotic red-green-black card, like, say, a Rakdos agent and a Golgari agent synthesizing together through the warping of the magical artifact that makes some people disappear and some people come back from the dead. The pieces are not impossible to work with. It's really easy for me to posit this, of course. I'm just some guy, some random nerd on the internet with a bunch of opinions to be heard. What I'm doing here is also real easy to talk about as an armchair opinion haver, and I don't have to work out the art problem. I don't imagine a lot of money was ever going to go to world building in this set. I can talk about art direction, but the set might not have even had a dedicated art director because it might not have been able to commission any art at all. I'm sure slush art got used, but I don't know if all of this art is slush art or augmented slush art. It's easy for me to criticize, and I do. But Through the Omenpaths is what happens when Wizards doesn't care. It's what the best in the world do when they're not motivated to make something good, or not given the money to make something good. And here's the kicker. The set code for Through the Omenpaths is OM1. They are completely prepared, and indeed likely, to do this again.